I was clearly just an ordinary lumberjack, but this forest was far from simple. Not only did it have tree species I'd never seen before, there were beasts that worshipped trees, and even wishes that could only be triggered upon freezing to death. I survived by relying on a hunting rifle. But the moment I emerged from the deep mountains, everyone ran away as if they had seen a plague god. Simply because my body was already exuding a world-ending aura. And the creatures I had killed earlier were not ordinary beasts. In the outside world, they were all infamous, and after death, they became a part of me. And today is my first day on the job. Young man, has your brain been kicked by a donkey? Running to this god-forsaken place to be a lumberjack? A truck was driving deep into the dense forest. Ahead lay an endless primeval forest. Old Tang had one arm propped on the car window, a cigarette pinched between his fingers, his other hand gripping the steering wheel. He stared fixedly ahead, at the bumpy, pitted road. He was the dedicated driver for the Great Forest Company, specifically responsible for transporting timber out of the remote wilderness. For the money, of course. 30,000 a month. Even if it meant cutting trees on Mount Everest, I'd do it. I replied, money over life, huh? Old Tang smiled. Do you know why I'm going into the mountains this time? Isn't it to transport wood? I looked over. That's just one of the reasons. Old Tang tapped his cigarette. The previous lumberjack hasn't been in contact for a month. The company suspects he's dead. Another reason I'm going there is to bring his body out. That's certain? I asked, puzzled. Old Tang sneered. It's all based on accumulated experience. More than a dozen lumberjacks have already died in that forest. As long as there's no contact within a month, they're basically all dead. I frowned. When I arrived, Bosley hadn't told him these things. What's going on? He asked in a cold voice. A sinister mind and a monstrous back. That stretch of woods is no ordinary one. I was scared just seeing it from afar. Old Tang laughed with a touch of dark humor. He just liked to scare these newcomers. However, what he said wasn't false. That forest was indeed a bit scary. The first time he went, a cold sweat broke out all over his back. Once you're here, there's no turning back. Old Tang reminded him, you've already signed the contract. The penalty for breach of contract is 10 million, right? I nodded. I looked out the window again. Old Tang smiled. Although the company's breach of contract penalty doesn't comply with legal regulations, there's nothing you can do about it. They have plenty of ways to deal with us ordinary folks. I said nothing more. I slowly let out a breath. It seemed there was no other choice. Originally, it was to earn tuition fees for my two younger sisters and living expenses. Without this job, my two younger sisters would have to eat dirt with me. At most, it's just a bit gloomy, I comforted myself. Old Tang smiled and said nothing more. He stubbed out his cigarette and pressed harder on the accelerator. Time flew by. The sun rose from the east directly overhead. Only then did the truck slow down. Further ahead was a wooden cabin. In front of the cabin were piles of wood cut into small pieces, and a new model forklift. We've arrived. Old Tang parked the truck in the open space in front of the wooden cabin. He opened the door and jumped out. I also jumped out. I stretched. After 2 days of riding in the truck, we finally arrived. I have to say, this place is truly remote. I wonder why they cut trees, why it has to be in such a deep place. But the environment here is quite good. Surrounded by mountains on 3 sides. Only the small road we came in on was relatively flat. The nearby trees were mostly Korean red pines. Each one grew tall and stately. Most of them looked to be at least 100 years old. Come with me into the cabin and have a look. Old Tang pulled 2 hunting rifles from the car. He tossed one to me. When entering a place like this, you definitely need to carry a gun, to avoid encountering wild beasts. The 2 of them walked towards the cabin, one after the other. Before even entering, I smelled a foul odor. Damn it, he's really dead. Old Tang covered his nose and kicked the door open with a powerful blow. The 2 of them looked inside the house. They saw a figure kneeling on the ground, head bowed. His head was touching the ground. His hands were also sprawled on the ground. Beneath him, was a dried line of blood. It extended all the way to the doorway. It seemed he had been dead for quite a while. He was kneeling towards the square table in the corner. On it sat a piece of black wood. In the bowl in front, there were also broken incense sticks. It somewhat resembled the Buddhist practice of 5-point prostration. I frowned and said, "You know about this too?" Old Tang was startled for a moment, then said, "Just guessing." Old Tang gave a helpless laugh. He walked inside, holding his gun. He poked the person with his gun. The next second, the person completely slumped to the ground like a puddle of wet clay. I followed, frowning. Although I wasn't particularly afraid, that smell was truly pungent. Just like the last one. Sure enough, there's a ghost here. The last one also died like this. The next one probably will too. With that, Old Tang smiled at me. "You don't hit a smiling face. Let's go. Let's go get the shroud and send him back." Old Tang turned and left. I followed. This place really did look a bit eerie. I already had goosebumps all over my body. The two of them got the shroud and wrapped up the man. As they turned him over, they finally saw the wound, a large gash on his neck. It looked like it was caused by some kind of wild beast with a poor bite. Was torn apart alive. He probably wasn't dead yet at the time. Struggled all the way to this wooden cabin, and then kowtowed to this piece of wood. I can't quite figure it out. Not asking the company for help immediately, but instead asking this piece of wood for help. Did he think this piece of wood was more likely to save him? What exactly is this piece of wood? Filled with doubts, Old Tang and I moved the man to a corner of the truck bed. Loaded these logs onto the truck. Old Tang directed, "I'll go smoke a cigarette nearby. It's unsettling." Old Tang ran to the front of the truck and squatted down. Lit a cigarette and slowly sat on the straw mat. I, on the other hand, went to operate the forklift. Transported all the logs onto the truck. These logs were not the common Scots pine found here, but a kind of wood with black bark and a yellow core. It was different from the wood placed inside the house for offerings. The one inside the house had black bark and a black core. "What kind of tree is this?" After loading the truck, I asked Old Tang. "Black pear blossom," Old Tang said, extinguishing his cigarette. Stood up and pointed towards the depths of the mountain. "That's where these trees are. The company only wants this kind. Cutting just 10 trees a month is considered meeting the quota." I nodded. "That's quite simple." Old Tang let out a cold laugh and didn't want to elaborate further. He quickly got into the truck and left. "Young man, take care of yourself. If there's danger, contact the company. The company people will come a month later to collect your body." The sound of the truck's engine gradually faded into the distance. I seemed to understand the previous logger. Why, when he froze to death, he made that choice. By the time the company arrives, I'd already be rotten. But worshipping that piece of wood is also quite absurd. Somewhere deep in the mountains, two black-robed figures, armed with knives, one standing and one lying down, both staring at the secret order before them. The one standing was called Mang Tian. His aura was as if he wanted to devour people. The one lying down was called Si Shui. Covered in blood. There was a blood hole at his waist, frozen through. Captain Bighead went deeper inside. I couldn't stop Sisui, who was clutching the poisoned wound at his waist. He was panting heavily. Mang Tian nodded. His 5 fingers gripped the knife. His finger joints had all turned blue. A grand blueprint for our wuxia's night watchman for a time. Sooner or later, I'll make him repay this grudge. Now, I'll take you back first. Mang Tian tucked the knife into his waist. He picked Sisui up. The two of them walked out of the dense forest. There's even a refrigerator. Inside the wooden cabin, I opened the refrigerator in the living room. Inside, there was still some food. There was enough meat, eggs, and milk for him to eat for a month. I walked around the wooden cabin. I got a basic understanding of the living conditions here. The cabin's living facilities were quite complete. There was a pot and a refrigerator. There was even a well in the yard. In the warehouse behind the wooden cabin, there was still some logging equipment, but only a few ordinary, new-style chainsaws. And a few chainsaws with broken chains. And a few barrels of coal, along with some gasoline, though its purpose was unclear. There was also a solar power generation device on the cabin roof. This prevented life here from regressing to the primitive age. Not bad, I mused. Yi Jun. The conditions here were not as harsh as he had imagined. In fact, One could even say they were quite good. The only problem was the loneliness. Staying alone in this remote wilderness, there wasn't even anyone to talk to. But considering a monthly salary of 30,000, I felt this bit of loneliness was completely bearable. Closing the cabin door, he took his hunting rifle and went into the mountains. He planned to first go and check out the black pear blossom forest, and while he was at it, clear out the nearby wild beasts. The previous logger was probably bitten to death by some kind of wild beast. Generally speaking, with their hunting rifles, they weren't afraid of these wild beasts. So his death was most likely due to being ambushed. So I planned to first track down the wild beasts hiding in the shadows, and ideally, eliminate them directly, lest I follow in his footsteps. Along a small path next to the wooden house, I carried my hunting rifle and walked into the mountains. The forest was bustling with animal activity. Bird song and cicada chirps were incessant. Occasionally, I saw some small animals on the path: squirrels, rabbits, pheasants, monkeys. But none of them had the ability to harm me, so I didn't hunt them. I continued walking forward. I stopped. I tightened my grip on the hunting rifle. By the path ahead, there were some broken saplings. The breaks in the saplings were still fresh. Fresh branches and leaves were still stretching out from the clean surface. This impact force was definitely not from a small animal. I gripped my hunting rifle tightly, and took off the safety. Following the tracks, I went after it. The direction in which the saplings were broken extended all the way into the depths of the forest. Along the way, there were also some trampled bushes and scattered tree bark. There were deep prints on the ground. Judging by their size, this was definitely a big creature. It wouldn't be a bear, would it? I muttered to myself. But looking at the shape of the prints, it shouldn't be a bear. The bear paw prints in bony bears aren't like this. I hadn't walked far when I heard a sound. It wasn't a roar, but heavy panting, and the cracking sound of trees being hit. I lightened my steps, and hid behind a large tree. Cautiously, I peered forward. It was a moose. Its size was somewhat outrageous. Over 3 meters tall, and its body length exceeded 6 meters. Overall, it looked like a small duck. This giant moose was struggling frantically. Its leg was firmly caught by 2 black pear trees. The 2 trees swayed precariously from its impact. A large piece of bark had been scraped off the trees, revealing the yellow wood underneath. The moose's eyes were bloodshot. The whites of its eyes were almost invisible. Only red blood vessels and bloodshot eyeballs remained. White foam was spraying from its mouth. 4 thick legs on the ground dug out deep pits. The surrounding soil was all turned up. It looked like it had been struggling for a long time. The fur on its body was soaked with sweat. A strong animal smell drifted over. I held my breath, observing the trapped moose pressed tightly behind the tree. This size isn't right, is it? I thought to myself. I remember moose aren't this big. Hesitated for a moment. I chose to leave. Moose are generally not aggressive, but this one was different. It was currently in a state of stress. If it broke free, it would very likely attack me. With such a large size, being hit by it would probably send me straight to the king of hell. And I wasn't sure if the hunting rifle in my hand could penetrate this thing's hide. So leaving was the best choice. If it died between these 2 trees, then it would be best if I could still try some of its meat. If it escaped, that wouldn't affect me either. I retreated, trying not to make a sound. Out of the woods, I continued deeper into the mountains. In this area, black pear blossoms could occasionally be seen, but the quantity was still too small. The forest for my logging work should be even further in. However, just after I left, that moose suddenly stopped struggling. It struggled to turn its head. Those bloodshot eyes stared directly in the direction I had left. On the other side, after I walked for another 10 minutes, I finally reached the black pear blossom forest. The tree bark was black. The leaves were bright red, like autumn maple leaves. Sunlight spilled down through the tree canopy. I squatted down and picked up a fallen red leaf. observed it carefully. The leaf's veins were very clear. It felt somewhat brittle to the touch. With a little force, it broke into several pieces. After the leaf shattered, I smelled a faint scent of ripe pears. Black pear is quite fitting. I threw away the broken leaves, dusted off my hands, gripped my hunting rifle and walked deeper into the woods. I needed to thoroughly survey this forest. After all, the work for the next month would all be done here. The light in the forest was much dimmer than outside. Although those red leaves were beautiful, they also blocked most of the sunlight. The ground was covered with thick fallen leaves. They rustled underfoot. I made a circuit of the forest. I didn't find any wild animals. Strange, by all accounts. A forest this large should have some wild animals. But I didn't even find footprints or droppings. There wasn't even a bird's nest in the trees. It seems the previous lumberjack might have encountered beasts elsewhere. This forest is still relatively safe for now. On several thick black pear trees, I carved marks with my knife. I planned to start work tomorrow. Anyway, I only needed to cut down 10 trees each month. It wasn't difficult at all. One could even say it was easy. After making the marks, I prepared to head back. It was still early, but he wanted to get back to the cabin early to prepare dinner, and also get familiar with the logging equipment. He could also check on the moose at the same time, to see if it was still there. When he returned to where the moose was trapped, it was still trapped there. But by now, it had stopped struggling. Its head was pressed against the tree, foaming at the mouth. Clearly, it was not far from death. From this angle, I only then noticed on the nape of the moose's neck, there was a very deep wound. It looked like it had been cut by a knife, but the bleeding had stopped. However, there were no knives in this primeval forest. Perhaps it was cut by some sharp rocks. And then a beast spirit ran wildly. It was stuck on the black pear blossom tree. Just as I was about to leave, the moose suddenly looked at me. Although its eyes were blood red, I could roughly understand what it meant. It was asking me for help. But I certainly didn't want to risk it. I just wanted to honestly earn money for my sister. Besides, if this kind of animal dies, it dies. I could even taste what moose meat was like. What did the life or death of a wild animal matter to me? The fact that I wasn't putting 2 more shots into it to get the meat early, was already a great act of kindness. I turned and left, leaving behind the moose, which was once again struggling frantically. By the time I returned to the cabin, the sun had already begun to bleed. A streak of orange-red sunset glow appeared on the horizon. The damp, foul smell in the cabin hadn't completely dissipated yet. I opened all the windows for ventilation, then I went to the well and drew a bucket of water. I carefully wiped clean the remaining bloodstains on the floor. After I finished all this work, the sky finally grew dark. Night comes quickly in the forest. The moment the sun went down, the surroundings quickly grew dark. Luckily, there were electric lights in the cabin. I turned on the lights, and the cabin instantly brightened up. He took out some food from the refrigerator and prepared a simple dinner. During dinner, my gaze involuntarily fell upon that square table in the corner. I swallowed the food in my mouth, and put down my bowl and chopsticks. I walked to that table, and picked up that piece of black wood. The wood was approximately a foot long, and pitch black all over, as if coated with a layer of black lacquer. But upon closer inspection, one could discover that this black color was emanating from within the wood, not a surface coating. It's better to rely on oneself than to pray to gods. I put the wood back. I turned around and returned to the table to continue eating. After dinner, I did a quick tidy up. He checked the doors, windows, and shotgun. Only after confirming everything was fine did he lie down on the bed. The bed was relatively clean. The bedding was a new set he took from the cupboard. It was probably sent by the company periodically. The shotgun was placed by the pillow, within arm's reach. The primeval forest was not quiet at night. Outside, there were animal cries everywhere, like ghosts wailing and wolves howling. Gradually, my breathing became even. My consciousness began to blur. However, just as he was about to fall asleep, the bed suddenly vibrated slightly. Very slight, as if someone had stomped their foot in the distance. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, thinking it was my imagination. But immediately after, there was another slight tremor. My sleepiness vanished instantly. My whole body became alert. Frowning, I turned over and pressed my ear to the bed. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy footsteps came from the distance, as if some behemoth was approaching, and the sound became clearer and clearer. This was not a wild boar or a wolf. The intensity of this vibration definitely belonged to a much larger animal. Moreover, this sound was gradually approaching the direction of the wooden cabin. I abruptly sat up and grabbed the shotgun by the pillow. The metallic touch made him feel a little more at ease. He quickly checked the rounds. Full with 6 bullets. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was getting closer. I could already hear the footsteps outside. That thing was walking straight towards the wooden cabin, then stopped in front of the window. It became quiet outside. I held my breath and gripped the shotgun tightly. My eyes fixed on the cabin window. Moonlight streamed in through the window, casting a patch of silvery white light on the floor. Its lower half was obscured by a massive dark shadow. This shadow, on its head, it had feet. The shadow was messy, like a multitude of outstretched ghostly hands. My palms began to sweat. Remembered the moose trapped in the treetop during the day. Remembered its bloodshot eyes. Remembered it, as I was leaving, struggling frantically. No way, it couldn't be it, could it? How is that possible? The next moment, the window glass shattered with a crash. A huge head forcefully squeezed through the window. Glass shards flew everywhere. A few pieces grazed my cheek, leaving a subtle sting. The massive antlers, covered in mud and blood, were almost tearing the entire window frame apart. The window frame groaned under the strain. It was the moose from earlier today. It had actually broken free. The moose's head almost filled the entire window. Its blood-red eyes stared intently at me on the bed. Its mouth was wide open, revealing its teeth and tongue. White foam mixed with blood from its mouth kept dripping onto the bed, making a dripping sound. A heavy, foul stench assaulted me. Damn it, I didn't even think. I just raised my hunting rifle and fired. The gunshot boomed in the wooden cabin, making my ears ring. The bullet accurately hit the moose's face. A bloody hole instantly burst open on its left cheek. The moose let out a sharp shriek. Its entire head thrashed wildly. Its massive antlers slammed against the window frame with loud thuds. It frantically tried to squeeze its head inside, and then gore me to death with those sharp antlers. The wooden window frame groaned and cracked under the immense pressure. Wood splinters flew everywhere. The entire window was tottering. Its front leg was already resting on the windowsill. Its whole body was desperately trying to squeeze in. Fortunately, its massive antlers were firmly stuck in the window frame, becoming the biggest obstacle to its advance. I pulled back the bolt of the rifle, raised my hand, and fired again. Bang! This time, it hit near the moose's right eye. Blood, mixed with an unknown liquid, splattered out. The moose's shriek became even sharper. The entire wooden cabin shook. The tools hanging on the wall clattered down. I took a step back. I cycled the bolt repeatedly. Bang! Another shot hit the moose's nose. The moose's entire face was already a bloody mess, but those bright red eyes were still fixed on me, filled with defiance. It finally realized it couldn't get in. Or rather, it realized that if this continued, it would bleed to death first. The moose let out one last defiant roar. It violently pulled its head back. The moment its antlers were pulled out of the window frame, the entire window completely collapsed. Wood and bricks clattered down. The moose snarled at me, turned and fled into the darkness. I seized the opportunity to rush to the window, and fired several shots at its fleeing back. Bang, bang, bang. Gunshots echoed in the night sky. The echoes reverberated back and forth through the forest. But the moose was still running. Although it was exposed, although it was covered in wounds, it was still desperately running deeper into the forest, until I could no longer see its figure, and could only hear its footsteps growing fainter in the distance. I finally lowered my gun, gasping for breath. My whole body was soaked in cold sweat. Damn it, didn't they say no spirits after the founding of the PRC? I wiped the sweat from my forehead. The more I thought about it, the more scared I became. During the day, I didn't save it. At night, it came for revenge. This moose's intelligence was a bit too high. If its leg hadn't gotten stuck in the window frame, I would probably have been pinned to death on the bed by now. No, I can't just sit here and wait to die. Since this beast holds a grudge, It will definitely come back to cause trouble for me later. I fired at least 7 or 8 shots just now. That beast was covered in wounds. The blood loss must be considerable. I can't wait. I took a deep breath, and made a decision. I must take advantage of this moose being injured, and while its combat strength is reduced due to excessive blood loss, I must proactively attack and kill it completely. Otherwise, I'll have to live in fear every night, and might even be ambushed and killed by it in my sleep one day. Rather than passively defending, it's better to actively attack. I walked to the table, opened the drawer, and took out all the backup supplies I needed to fill my pockets. Then I turned and pushed open the cabin door. The moon hung in the sky, large and round, like a giant eye looking down on the earth. The moon was very bright, illuminating almost the entire forest clearly. This meant he didn't need to carry a lamp. A lamp's light would expose his position, and in this situation, only make him more passive. The roars of beasts all around rose and fell, but I couldn't worry about anything else now. I had to find that moose. I would deal with him tonight. Either he dies, or I die. There was no third option. After walking for about a dozen minutes, I stopped. I heard the sound of the moose, a very heavy breathing. I held my breath, and tiptoed forward. Pushing through a thicket of bushes, I looked ahead. In an open space not far ahead, that giant moose was kneeling beneath a black pear blossom tree. Its head was pressed against the ground, its front legs sprawled on the ground, and its hind legs kneeling. It was exactly the prostrate posture, identical to the previous lumberjack's posture before death. I hid behind a tree, a chill rising in my heart. How could this beast be like a human? Moonlight fell on the moose, and I could clearly see the dense wounds all over its body. 2 bloody holes on its face, a huge gash on its neck, bullet holes everywhere on its back and legs. Fresh blood flowed down its body, accumulating in a large puddle on the ground, gleaming with an eerie blackish red under the moonlight. Logically speaking, after losing so much blood, he should have died long ago, but he was still alive, still breathing. He just knelt there, motionless, facing that black pear blossom tree. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Then slowly raised my gun. Peeking out from behind the tree, I aimed at the moose. Its head, my finger on the trigger. The gunshot exploded in the silent forest. The surrounding birds were startled into flight, flapping away into the night sky. The bullet accurately struck the moose's head, blasting open a bloody hole in its skull. The moose's body convulsed violently. It abruptly raised its head. The wound on its neck was completely torn open. Fresh blood gushed out. Those blood-red eyes instantly locked onto my hiding spot. Even with an extra bloody hole in its head, it still wasn't dead. Instead, it staggered to its feet. Watching this scene, my scalp tingled. This beast's life was too tough. The moose steadied itself and lowered its head, using its blood-stained, saw-like antlers, pointing them in my direction. Its hind legs pawed at the ground, kicking up a spray of dirt. The next second, the moose charged wildly towards me. Its speed was even faster than I imagined. Even with its body riddled with wounds, even with blood flowing incessantly, it still burst forth with astonishing speed. The ground was shaking. Small trees along the way were snapped by its charge, emitting crunching sounds. My adrenaline instantly surged. I sharply drew a deep breath, raised my hunting rifle and quickly aimed. Bang! A shot hit the moose's head. The moose's body swayed, but it didn't stop. Click, the bolt was pulled. Bang! Another shot hit its head, but it still didn't stop. The distance grew shorter, 10 meters. I could clearly see the white mist spraying from the moose's nostrils. Click-clack, the bolt was pulled. Bang! It still hit him in the head. The moose reeled a bit, but it was still charging, 5 meters away. The moose's hooves were almost touching me. Click-clack, bang, this shot still hit its head. Finally, the moose's body violently jolted. Its forward momentum abruptly stopped. Its front legs suddenly lost strength, and its massive body began to lose control. It reeled, trying to stab me with its last bit of strength. But finally, it collapsed. Its massive body, under inertia, slid forward for over a meter, finally crashing down with a thud in front of me. Warm blood splattered all over my face, foul-smelling and viscous. And that pair of jagged antlers, stopped less than half a meter from my calf. If it had slid just a bit further, my leg would have been gored. Little evil, little fragments, big evil, big fragments. 4 terms suddenly flashed through my mind. But at this moment, I didn't care at all. I just took them as hallucinations. It took me a while to react. My legs went weak, and I slumped directly onto the ground. Hoo-hoo, I gasped for air, feeling like my lungs were about to burst. My heart was pounding as if it would leap out of my chest. The thumping sound echoed in my ears. Looking at the moose's corpse in front of me, my hands were still trembling slightly. Who would have thought a moose could hold a grudge? And I almost met the same fate as the previous co-worker. I was truly terrified. The animals here have become demonic, especially under the moonlight. The scene of the moose kneeling before the black pear blossom. Even now, thinking about it, my calves tremble. I really wanted to go back, contact the company, and quit. But thinking of the 10 million yuan penalty for breach of contract, I felt utterly powerless again. Fine, I slammed my fist into the dirt. I glanced at the moose's corpse. Then, carrying my gun, I turned and left. When I returned to the wooden cabin, it was still dark. I placed the hunting rifle on the table. My whole body felt like it was falling apart. I dug out the satellite phone from the cabinet. I dialed Boss Lee's number. The phone rang for a long time before it was answered. From the other end came Boss Lee's voice, tinged with annoyance from being woken up. Who is it? In the dead of night. Boss Lee, I'm Xianxia. Little Lin. Boss Lee's voice cleared up a bit. What's the matter, this late at night? I took a deep breath. I almost died tonight. I briefly recounted the incident with the moose, including its size, its retaliatory behavior, and the bizarre scene of it kneeling before the black pear blossom. The other end of the line was silent for a few seconds. Little Lin, don't be nervous. Boss Lee's voice became gentler. These large animals have relatively high intelligence. It might have learned those actions by imitating humans. What you described as kneeling should just be a coincidence. Coincidence? I sneered. Boss Lee, why didn't you tell me before I came that over a dozen lumberjacks died here? Boss Lee let out a dry laugh. Little Lin, a job with a monthly salary of 30,000 is practically impossible to find out there. If everything went smoothly, how could I offer so much? You think 30,000 a month is enough to buy my life? I understand how you feel. Boss Lee sighed. How about this? Considering the unusual situation you've encountered, I'll give you an extra 10,000 each month. How about 40,000 a month? 40,000 is unlucky. Add another 20,000, then I'll give you 60,000. Just keep up the good work. The company won't treat you unfairly. Beep, beep, beep. The call was disconnected. I held the satellite phone, stunned for a while. Finally, I smiled wryly. 60,000 seems too little. I should have asked for more. The contract was already signed. The penalty for breach of contract was 10 million. He could only try his best to secure benefits for himself now. Earn more money to leave for his sisters. I put down the phone. I turned to look at the shattered window. The entire window frame was warped. Glass shattered all over the floor. The cool summer breeze poured in from outside, making the room chilly. Tomorrow I'll have to find some wood to fix it. I mumbled. I picked up a pillow from the bed and turned to walk towards the bathroom. The bathroom was very small, but at this moment, this confined space instead gave me a strange sense of security. There were no windows, only a door. As long as I locked the door, at least, I wouldn't have to worry about something suddenly breaking through the window. At most, it would just break through the door. It seemed almost the same. I sat on the toilet lid, hugging the pillow and leaning against the wall, preparing to make do for a night here. I suddenly remembered when I had just killed that moose. The 4 words that popped into my mind. It was something like xiao, and da. I've already somewhat forgotten. I also didn't know why these things would appear in my mind. It sounded like a kind of rank. While I was thinking, My gaze accidentally swept across the bathroom doorframe. The upper edge of the doorframe revealed a small corner. It was dusty and looked like it had been forgotten for a long time. I paused for a moment, stood up on my tiptoes and reached for the object. It was a notebook. Its cover was covered in a thick layer of dust. It looked like it had been placed there for a long time. I guessed it was when the moose hit the window that it was shaken off the doorframe. I wiped it with my hand, revealing the dark blue hardcover beneath. I opened the notebook. On the first page were a few words. First page by Duan Mu. The handwriting was a bit messy, but still legible. I looked further down. Day 1, successfully infiltrated Great Forest Company. Became a lumberjack. In order to investigate the secrets behind this company, I must go deep inside. Today, the driver dropped me off at the wooden cabin. The environment here was even more remote than I had imagined, but the facilities were quite complete. Old Tang said the previous logger died, and told me to be careful. I felt there was something wrong here. On the third day, I confirmed this place was an eerie domain. The familiars within me were completely suppressed, unable to use any abilities, just like an ordinary person. This feeling was awful. From the moment I arrived here, I became an ordinary person. An anomaly capable of forming an eerie domain must be at least city-destroying level. What on earth is Big Forest Company up to? On the 7th day, I started felling the black pear trees. These trees are very strange. The bark is black, the leaves are red, and it has a faint pear scent. The company must want these trees for a special reason, but I'm not yet sure what makes them special. Day 10. Today, deep in the forest, I discovered an ice silk. A wild boar was kneeling before a black pear tree, its front legs bent, its head touching the ground, exactly like a human's full prostration. It possessed intelligence. Clearly, it was worshipping this tree. After the wild boar left, I cut open the bark of this black pear tree. Inside, it was surprisingly black. I cut off a piece of black wood and took it back. I tried to imitate the anomaly worshipping it, but I discovered nothing. Day 15. All the anomalies in this forest, when they die, will go and prostrate themselves before the black-hearted black pear trees. I don't know what they are worshipping, but this behavior is clearly not instinctual. It's more like some kind of ritual. My initial speculation is that the eerie domain here might be formed by these black-hearted black pear trees, or these trees are themselves part of a powerful anomaly. Day 20. I'm going to die. Today, I encountered an anomalous bear in the forest. Its size was absurdly huge. Its shoulder height was at least 4 meters. He attacked me. My leg was bitten. The blood loss was severe. I shot him in the eye with my hunting rifle. He escaped. But I know he'll be back. I tried to worship black-hearted black pear blossom again. This time, I seemed to feel something. But I can't put my finger on it. If anyone finds this handwriting, please take it back to the city and hand it over to the government. This is very important to us. The Great Forest Company seems to have a very dangerous plan. They must be dealt with. The notes stop here. The following few pages were torn out, leaving only ragged edges. I closed the notebook, lost in thought. Kin of the eerie desire. Anomaly. These words sound like settings from a novel. It couldn't be some web novelist working a part-time job here, could it? What proper person writes a diary? I muttered to myself, but then I shook my head. Tomorrow, I'll deal with the moose's carcass first. Otherwise, the bloody smell will attract all the other wild beasts in the mountains. Then I'll be in even more danger. For me, something in a notebook trying to make me change my worldview, that's just too unreasonable. I'd rather believe my own 20 years of experience, rather than a notebook. I put the notebook aside. Hugging my pillow, I leaned against the wall. The fatigue in my body quickly overcame the unease in my heart. My eyelids grew heavier, and finally, I fell into a deep sleep in the bathroom. Early the next morning, I was woken by the birds chirping outside the window. I rubbed my stiff neck. I walked out of the bathroom. Sunlight streamed into the room through the broken window, bringing a touch of warmth. I ate a simple meal. Then I picked up my hunting rifle. A machete was tucked into my waist. I walked towards the clearing from last night. Passing through the dense forest, I arrived at that open space. The moose's body was still there. Its huge body was emitting a bloody smell under the sun. I didn't see any bite marks on the carcass. It seems no wild beasts have been attracted yet. I breathed a sigh of relief. I had been worried the carcass would be dragged away by other wild beasts. But it seems the animals in this forest are not interested in the moose's carcass. Or perhaps they don't dare to approach. I walked over to the carcass and squatted down. A body of such a large size, I couldn't drag it at all. A forklift couldn't drive deep into the forest either. I'll cut some meat and take it back, and just burn the rest. I made a decision. Keeping the carcass would only attract trouble. Better to burn it clean with the fire. At least the bloody smell wouldn't spread. Of course, setting fire in the forest is very dangerous. I planned to dig a firebreak before burning. This way, I wouldn't have to worry about being blamed. I drew the machete from my waist and began cutting at the moose's rib area. The moose's hide was very thick. With my great strength and a sharp enough knife, before long, I cut off a large piece of bone-in ribs. It weighed dozens of pounds, enough to eat for a while. I wrapped the meat with the plastic sheet I carried it on my shoulder, then returned to the wooden cabin to get a shovel. The next task would be even harder. Fortunately, the moose died in the clearing. There were no branches on it. I only needed to clear the ground. I took off my jacket and swung the shovel, starting to dig. The sun moved from the east to directly overhead. My clothes were soaked with sweat several times over. Finally, after several hours of hard work, the firebreak was dug. I took out a lighter from my pocket and lit several fires around the moose carcass. The flames quickly spread. The moose's fur and fat became the best fuel. Black smoke billowed upwards. The air was filled with the smell of burning meat. I brought over a large amount of dry branches and dry grass, and completely covered the entire carcass. After all this was done, I retreated to the side, resting against a black pear tree. Several hours later, the fire gradually diminished. When the flames completely died out, the moose's carcass had already turned into a pile of ashes and charred bones. Only the pair of massive antlers still lay intact in the ash pile. I walked over, bent down, and picked up the antlers. The antlers were very heavy, but their texture was hard. The tips were unusually sharp. Perhaps they could be made into a knife. I looked at the antlers, pondering. Such things are generally popular with rich people. Perhaps I could find an opportunity to have old Tang sell them. Just as I was about to leave, I suddenly remembered the contents of the notebook. Tuanmu said that the anomalies here all worship a special kind of black pear tree. The black-hearted black pear tree. The one the moose worshipped last night. I turned and walked to that black pear tree. I drew my machete, then forcefully cut a gash in the bark. The moment the blade cut through the bark, a rich pear scent wafted towards me. It really was the black-hearted black pear tree. I muttered to myself, these instead also suffer. It is this kind of black-hearted black pear tree that is worshipped. So, the question is, what exactly are they worshipping? And what is hidden behind these trees? I stared at the black cut, and for a moment, fell into deep thought. The wind blew through the woods, and the red leaves rustled, like countless whispering voices. I can't figure it out. Put away the machete, hoisted the antlers, left the clearing without looking back. At the entrance of Jiangdu University in Jiangdu City, it was dismissal time. During peak hours, the crowd was immense. A simply dressed girl stood under a sycamore tree by the roadside, watching the passing vehicles. Lin Chu was wearing white leather boots that had faded from washing, paired with cheap jeans. On her feet were a pair of severely worn canvas shoes. But even with such a simple outfit, it couldn't hide the girl's stunning beauty. Exquisite facial features, like a work of art meticulously carved by God. Her long, dark hair was casually tied into a ponytail. A few wisps of hair fell by her ears, lending an air of pure innocence. OMG, Lin Chu is a commoner herself. It's a joke. Her looks are amazing. Zizi is just too aloof. The rich young men pursuing her could form a soccer team. She doesn't pay attention to any of them. That's called having principles, okay? Unlike you guys who fawn over rich people. The discussions around them rose and fell. Some were envious, Some were jealous, and some were hostile. But Lin Chu completely ignored these gazes and whispers. She just quietly held her school bag, occasionally glancing at the time on her phone. The school bag was very old. The edges were frayed, but she kept it well maintained, without a single stain. On the school bag were embroidered 3 crooked little figures. 1 tall boy, 2 smaller girls. Just then, the roar of an engine went from distant to very close. A flashy red Ferrari sped from afar. Came speeding. It elegantly drifted around a corner at the school gate, and stopped steadily in front of Lin Chu. A commotion immediately broke out around them. Damn, a Ferrari 488. This car must cost over 3 million, right? Which young master is trying to show off again? Just waiting to see how Lin Chu rejects him. Ha ha ha. I just love scenes where these rich boys get humiliated. But the next second, everyone was dumbfounded. They only saw Lin Chu walk to the car, open the passenger door and get in. The entire school gate instantly fell silent for a second. Then it instantly erupted. No way, Lin Chu got in the car. No way, no way. The goddess has been conquered. It's over, it's over. Another one corrupted by money. I don't believe it, I don't believe it. Damn it. Why don't rich people go to bars? What biochemical mother are they playing? They just have to come and ruin our fun. Brothers, I'm heartbroken. The boys' wails rose and fell, one after another. Several who had pursued Ling Chu's young masters were even more disbelieving. They all quickly sent their underlings to investigate. Who's got such powerful backing? Meanwhile, the girls quickly pulled out their phones and started frantically sending messages in various chat groups. Shocking. Commoner school beauty Lin Chu got into a Ferrari. Lin Chu is in love. The other person drives a Ferrari. Jiangdu University's biggest gossip, Lin Chu taken by a rich person. Meanwhile, Lin Chu was completely unaware that outside, chaos had erupted. She sat cautiously in the passenger seat, tightly clutching her school bag, feeling a bit nervous. The car's leather seats emitted a faint fragrance. The various buttons on the central console made her dizzy. This car's interior was probably more expensive than her entire year's living expenses. Don't be nervous, a cool, clear voice sounded in her ear. The driver was a blue-haired girl wearing sunglasses. She looked to be in her early 20s. Her demeanor was very gloomy. She took off her sunglasses, revealing a pair of amber eyes and a tear mole at the corner of her eye. She said with a light chuckle, "My name is Lu Su, Vice Captain of the Jiangdu Night Watchman. Welcome to the Night Watchman, Lin Chu." The engine roared. The Ferrari slowly started and drove away from the school gate under everyone's complicated gazes. "Hello, Sister Lu Zai. My name is Lin Chu." "Don't call me sis," Lu Zai said with a laugh. "Just call me Lu Zai. I'm only 23 this year. And I'm not much older than you." He skillfully manipulated the steering wheel. The Ferrari weaved nimbly through traffic, like a red squid. Thank you, Sister Lu Zai." Lu Zai was speechless. Lin Chu quickly corrected himself. Then, after thinking for a moment, he asked, Lu Zai, may I ask, what exactly is my job?" "It's simple, kill an anomaly and protect ordinary people." Lu Zai said while driving, "We found you yesterday because we detected that abnormal death fluctuation. Whenever an anomalous death occurs, a special kind of energy is released. We have specialized equipment that can detect it. Then we tracked you down. We found that you killed that Jin Gui, and even absorbed its power, becoming its patron." Lin Chu listened, half understanding, half not. "What is a patron?" Lu Zai smiled, and patiently explained. "A patron is someone who possesses a retainer. A retainer is the monster you killed. After it dies, its power is absorbed by the person who killed it, thus becoming that person's retainer. You are now its retainer. You can summon it to help you fight, or directly use its abilities. However, you haven't fully mastered it yet, so it might be difficult to control." Lin Chu nodded, recalling what happened yesterday. His younger sister Lin Chi's birthday was approaching. He had saved 3 months' worth of living expenses, and finally gathered enough money. He wanted to buy his sister a dress that she had been longing for a long time. He went to the mall, and saw that black shadow in the fitting room mirror. "A Jin Gui?" Lu Zai nodded. "A minor evil, an anomaly?" Lin Chu nodded. Then he asked Lu Zai, Are there many of these anomalies? Many. Lu's eyes expression grew a little more serious. And the number is increasing. 3 years ago, the number of anomalies within wuxia was still very small, but in the last 3 years, the frequency of anomalies appearing has become higher and higher, and their number is also increasing. Moreover, the level of anomalies is constantly rising. He paused. He continued, "Oh, right. Let me explain the levels of anomalies to you. The weakest are lesser evils, like the mirror ghost you killed. They generally all have fatal weaknesses. As long as you find the weakness, even ordinary people can kill them. Above lesser evils are minor calamities. Anomalies of this level no longer have obvious weaknesses. Ordinary people find them very difficult to deal with. Further up are great evils and great calamities, both of which are terrifying. And above that, Lu's eyes expression grew solemn. Above that is the city-destroying level. As the name suggests, they possess the ability to destroy an entire city. Above the city-destroying level is the province-destroying level. Anomalies of this level can wipe out an entire province. So far, they have appeared twice within wuxia. Both times required the deployment of significant manpower and resources to barely suppress them. Above the province-destroying level is the nation-destroying level. To be honest, I haven't seen anomalies of this level either. I heard one appeared abroad once, almost causing the collapse of the entire Europe. As for the highest tier, the world-destroying level, that already exceeds the scope of human understanding. Once it appears, human civilization might be doomed. Lin Shooting's face turned pale. Then, what if one really appears? Pray, Lu's eye said with resignation to the director. Pray that it doesn't appear, or pray that someone can stop it. Lin Shu nodded. Then, after a moment of silence, he mustered up his courage and asked, Lu's eye, I wanted to ask what the salary is. His face turned red as he spoke. He felt he was being too mercenary, but he couldn't help it. He had to ask for clarification. It's too hard for Big Brother to earn money alone. He wanted to help Big Brother lighten the load. Lu's eye was stunned for a moment. Then he burst out laughing, ha ha ha. You're quite straightforward. After promotion to the elementary level, a monthly salary of 10,000. While the salary isn't exceptionally high, other benefits are comprehensive. All 5 social insurances and 1 housing fund are fully paid. Paid leave and triple pay on public holidays. Moreover, the night watchmen have their own medical system. Medical care is completely free. No matter how severe the injury, it can be treated. Most importantly, your family will also be brought under the night watchman's protection and enjoy medical benefits. Lin Chu's eyes lit up. He quickly calculated in his mind, 10,000 a month. That's 120,000 a year. Finally, he could help lighten the load for this family. Big Brother is too tired by himself. He didn't know where he had gone to work this time. Thinking of this, Lin Chu, felt a pang of heartache. My grades were originally very good. I could have gotten into a key university. But I dropped out of high school to work and earn money to put my brother and sister through school. I've done many jobs. Carrying corpses at a crematorium. Test sleeping in haunted houses. Recovering bodies from the Yellow River. All those dangerous jobs that others were unwilling to do. But I never complained. Every time I called back, I said I was fine, telling my brother and sister to study well, not to worry. At this thought, Lin Chu's eyes welled up with tears. He finally no longer felt so powerless. Chapter 8, The Incredibly Resilient Black Pear Blossom. As night fell, the last trace still lingered on the horizon of the orange-red sunset glow. I had just used the chopped-down dolopine to securely fix the bedroom window. Finally, it was no longer drafty. Wiping the sweat from my forehead, I stretched my sore shoulders. After a busy afternoon, my stomach, against my will, began to rumble. I walked to the refrigerator. I opened the door. From the bottom shelf, I took out a piece of moose meat wrapped in plastic wrap. The meat had been cut from the moose carcass today. It had been divided into many fist-sized pieces. On the fresh red meat were even marbling patterns. I washed the meat clean and sliced it thinly. Then I put it into the pot. He didn't add too many seasonings. Just sprinkled a little salt, poured in a little water, and simply cooked it like that. Soon, a rich meaty aroma wafted from the pot. This aroma was different from ordinary beef beef or venison. It was richer and mellower. Just smelling it made one's appetite soar. I picked up a piece of cooked meat with chopsticks, blew on it, and put it into my mouth. The meat was very substantial. When bitten, it had a unique chewiness. But it wasn't tough like beef that gets stuck in your teeth. Instead, the more you chewed, the more flavorful it became. And after this meat went down, I felt a warm current starting from my abdomen, spreading throughout my entire body. That feeling was like drinking a bowl of hot soup in winter, or like taking a hot bath. All the fatigue in my body vanished without a trace at that moment. The soreness accumulated from moving planks earlier and installing windows instantly dissipated, replaced by a feeling full of vitality and ease. This meat gives strength, I praised. If I had known, I would have cut more. I regret not doing so earlier. I wonder if there are any other moose in these mountains. Perhaps I should just forget it. It's probably best not to provoke them. The thought of the moose that only died after I shot it many times sent shivers down my spine. After eating, I quickly tidied up the dishes and chopsticks and cleaned the kitchen. Then I entered the bedroom. The hunting rifle was placed at the head of the bed. I lay on the bed, staring at the repaired window for a while. I pondered my plan for tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'll officially start felling trees. I've been here for 2 days and haven't even really touched a saw. 10 trees a month. An average of 1 tree every 3 days. Tomorrow, I'll have to cut at least 1 tree to get a feel for it. As I was thinking, my eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Soon, I drifted off to sleep. I slept very deeply. Perhaps it was because I ate moose meat, or perhaps I was too tired yesterday. I didn't even dream. I slept soundly until dawn. Early the next morning, I was woken up by the bird song outside the window. Sunlight streamed in through the gaps in the wooden planks, casting golden beams of light onto the floor. I got up and quickly washed myself. I drew a bucket of well water and washed my face with the icy cold water. Instantly, I felt much more awake. After breakfast, I slung the hunting rifle onto my back, fastened the machete at my waist, then picked up the chainsaw from the storage room. I checked it over. After confirming there were no issues, I shouldered the chainsaw and walked towards the black pear forest. The forest was very quiet in the early morning. Only the bird song and the sound of wind rustling through the leaves. The dew on the ground hadn't dried yet. It was wet and damp to step on, and soon, my pant legs and shoes were soaked. About 20 minutes later, I arrived at the black pear forest. Sunlight streamed down through the tree canopy. The red leaves were illuminated brightly, like burning flames. A faint pear scent wafted through the forest. It smelled very pleasant. I came to the tree I had marked the day before yesterday. It was a medium-sized black pear tree. The trunk's diameter was about 40 centimeters. Its height was visually estimated to be over 20 meters. I placed the saw on the ground. I first checked the fuel tank and chain. It should be fine. I took a deep breath. I bent down and grabbed the saw's handle. I pulled the starter cord hard. Whir, the chainsaw let out a low roar. My arms vibrated and tingled slightly. I adjusted my posture. I gripped the chainsaw tightly. Then I slowly brought the saw teeth closer to the tree trunk. However, the moment the saw teeth touched the bark, golden sparks immediately lit up. A grating, ear-piercing friction sound suddenly rang out. The chainsaw's chain rubbed violently against the bark. Sparks flew. Damn it! I quickly released the throttle. The chainsaw's roar subsided. I leaned in to look at the tree trunk. Only a shallow scratch was left on it. It had only cut through one layer of bark. So hard? I frowned, somewhat disbelieving. I had never seen wood this hard. Even ironwood, or hardwoods like rosewood, wouldn't be this hard. I didn't believe it and tried a few more times. I gave it full throttle, making the chain spin faster. Then I forcefully pressed the saw teeth against the tree trunk. Z, the grating friction sound rang out again. Sparks flew everywhere. Under such high-intensity friction, the chainsaw's chain snapped with a snap. I looked at the broken chainsaw, furrowing my brows. No wonder the oil in the warehouse hadn't been used much. So it turned out this chainsaw couldn't cut down black pear blossom trees at all. I then remembered the trapped moose. Such a large body, such strong impact force, was firmly stuck by 2 black pear blossom branches, unable to move. Now that I think about it, The hardness of this tree is indeed not comparable to ordinary wood. How did a lumberjack cut it? I picked up the broken chainsaw and turned to walk towards the cabin. When I arrived, on the open ground in front of the cabin, dozens of already cut black pear blossom logs were still piled up as timber. A lumberjack could cut down so many black pear blossoms. There definitely is a special tool. I threw the broken chainsaw by the warehouse door. I started searching carefully around the wooden house. First, I rummaged through the warehouse. Apart from a few ordinary axes and machetes, I didn't find anything special. Those axes and machetes were all ordinary items. Their edges were all blunt. It would be impossible to cut through the black pear blossom. I walked out of the warehouse. I walked around the yard. He turned over some sundries piled in the corner, uncovered the tattered object covering the ground. He even rummaged through the wood pile. Finally, beneath the pile of sundries by the well, I saw a patch of a different color. Pushing aside the sundries on top, a yellow axe appeared before his eyes. Both the handle and the axe head were made of wood. It looked like black pear blossom. An axe made of wood? Surely it couldn't be this axe that cuts it. I was deep in thought. He carried the axe and re-entered the black pear blossom forest. My world. Interesting. I gripped the handle tightly with both hands. I took a stance. Then I raised the axe high. The axe cut an arc through the air, and with a whistling sound, it chopped fiercely at the tree trunk. With a crisp car sound, I looked closely. A gash had actually appeared on the tree trunk. Though not deep, at least it had cut in. It really worked. I was a bit surprised. A tree that even a chainsaw couldn't cut through, was actually cut by this wooden axe. This black pear blossom is indeed peculiar. What is this? Fighting poison with poison? Fighting wood with wood? I grinned. I swung the axe and continued chopping. Look, 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 thin clothes, layer after layer, draped down. Each garment could be cut into by 1 or 2 centimeters. I chopped for about half an hour. Sweat began to bead on my forehead. I stopped to rest for a while. On the tree trunk, a considerable gash had already been cut. At this rate, I should be able to fell one today. He wiped away some sweat. Just as he was about to continue, a muffled sound suddenly rang out overhead. Immediately after, he felt a sudden slip, and almost fell to the ground. Damn it, I cursed. I sharply raised my head, only to see a squirrel standing on a nearby branch. Its black, beady eyes stared fixedly at me. This squirrel was a full size larger than ordinary squirrels. Its fur was reddish-brown, its tail large and fluffy, like a ball of fire in the sunlight. In its paws, it was still clutching a fist-sized pine nut. It looked rock-hard. The squirrel and I stared at each other for a second. The next moment, the squirrel suddenly raised its paw, and hurled the pine nut straight at my head. I didn't have time to think. Instinctively dodging to the side, the pine nut smashed into the tree trunk behind me, emitted a muffled sound. I touched my head. My hand came away with a smear of blood. Do you answer? I grabbed the nearby hunting rifle. I raised my arm and fired a shot. The gunshot echoed through the forest, startling a flock of birds into flight. But the squirrel was quick to react. By the time I grabbed my gun, it had already vanished without a trace. I stared in the direction the squirrel had fled, my brows tightly furrowed. This squirrel seemed to be here to stop me from chopping down trees. It seems this forest isn't just full of sentient moose. Even the damn squirrels have become spirits. That beast definitely hasn't gone far. It's probably hiding somewhere, watching me. Never mind. I put down the gun, deciding to chop trees first, and picked up the axe to continue chopping. However, it wasn't long before there was movement overhead again. Squeak, squeak, squeak. That squirrel popped out again. It stood on a high branch, and unleashed a barrage of attacks on me. Fist-sized pine nuts were hurled down from above, leaving bruises wherever they hit. It hurt so much I grimaced. Immediately, I threw down the axe. I grabbed the shotgun and unleashed a barrage of shots at the squirrel. Bang, bang, bang. Gunshots rang out continuously in the forest. But the squirrel was too agile. It kept jumping back and forth between the branches. I fired 5 or 6 shots in a row, but didn't hit it once. Damn it, I spat. I forced myself to calm down. I couldn't just shoot wildly like this. I needed to figure out a way to anticipate its movements. I took a deep breath, my eyes fixed on the squirrel. I waited, waiting for the squirrel to jump to its next position. The squirrel chirped twice. It peered out from behind a branch. The pine cone it held in its paws was hurled at me, and at the same time, it jumped to another tree. Now, the moment the gunshot rang out, the squirrel had just jumped out. Its body was suspended in midair, with nowhere to brace itself. It couldn't dodge at all. Thwack! The bullet accurately struck the base of the squirrel's tail. The squirrel let out a shrill scream. Its large, bushy tail was severed by the bullet, falling bloody from the air. It twitched a few times after hitting the ground. After losing its tail, its balance was instantly broken. It staggered on the branch a few times, almost falling down. It barely managed to grab onto a branch and steady itself. Still trying to run? With a click-clack, I pulled the bolt, ready for a follow-up shot. But the squirrel's will to survive was incredibly strong. It ignored the pain, and desperately fled deeper into the dense forest. After losing its tail, its movements clearly became much clumsier. It stumbled and leapt between trees, each jump left a trail of blood. I chased a few steps, gun raised, but the squirrel ran too fast, and quickly disappeared into the dense canopy. All right, I lowered my gun. I was somewhat reluctant. These wild beasts hold grudges. If I don't kill it, it will definitely come back to cause trouble later. The moose last time was a living example. I certainly don't want to experience that kind of dangerous situation again. No way. I have to chase it and kill it. I followed the bloodstains on the ground. Fortunately, the bloodstains were still quite obvious, winding all the way into the depths of the dense forest. I quickly advanced along the bloodstains, while cautiously observing my surroundings. In this forest, who knows what other dangerous things might be hidden. He certainly didn't want to, while chasing the squirrel, encounter another fierce beast. After chasing for about 10 minutes, I arrived at a forest of beauty pines. The trees here were more premium than those in the black pear blossom forest, and denser. The canopies almost completely blocked out all sunlight. The ground was dark. I stopped, raised my gun, and walked forward cautiously. The bloodstains on the ground became denser here. It seemed the squirrel had lost a lot of blood. It couldn't run far. Sure enough, I hadn't gone far when I saw that squirrel jump onto a huge beauty pine. There was a large hole in the trunk of that tree, at least 30 centimeters in diameter. Presumably, that must be the squirrel's home. I noted down the location, then turned and ran back. I raced all the way back to the wooden cabin. He took another chainsaw from the warehouse, then plunged back into the mountains. Arriving in front of that beauty pine, I was already out of breath from exhaustion. But he couldn't bother with resting, and immediately pulled the starter cord. Boom! The roar of the chainsaw echoed through the forest. The squirrel's frantic cries came from inside the tree hole, sounding terrified. I let out a cold laugh, and placed the saw blade against the tree trunk. Completely different from the black pear blossom, the trunk of this beauty pine was like tofu. The chainsaw easily cut into it. Wood chips flew everywhere. I walked around the tree trunk once. On the side closer to the tree hollow, I cut out a huge gap. A few minutes later, with a snap, the beauty pine began to tilt. The tree trunk groaned under the strain. The squirrel in the tree hollow sensed danger. Just before the tree was about to fall, the squirrel scurried out of the tree hollow. It leapt onto a nearby tree, trying to escape. I dropped the chainsaw, grabbed my hunting rifle and fired. Bang! The shot missed. The squirrel was too fast, and its body was small, which made it hard for me to hit. After a few leaps, it disappeared deep into the dense forest. Only a trail of blood was left behind. With a crash, the beauty pine toppled to the ground. It smashed down a large patch of bushes, making a huge noise. I stood still, looking in the direction where the squirrel had disappeared. My brows were tightly furrowed. I had already made an enemy of this squirrel, but I hadn't managed to deal with it completely. I sighed. But then I thought, I wasn't really afraid of just a squirrel. No matter how smart it was still just a squirrel. Unlike a moose that could instantly kill me. As long as it couldn't instantly kill me, I could finish it off. And it was seriously injured now. It probably wouldn't dare to come looking for trouble again anytime soon. If it dared to come back after its wounds healed, next time, it wouldn't just be its tail that fell off. I glanced at the fallen beauty pine, and then looked at the sky. The sun had already set. A faint orange-red hue appeared on the horizon. After all that effort this afternoon, I wouldn't be able to finish cutting down that black pear blossom tree today. Never mind, I'll come back tomorrow. I shouldered the chainsaw and hunting rifle, and turned to walk towards the wooden cabin. The squirrel, dragging its broken body, scurried wildly through the dense forest. A gentleman's revenge is never too late, even after 10 years. Just you wait, human. Once I establish my power, I will definitely come back and tear you to shreds. After leaving that forest, his body began to expand. His body, originally only the size of a palm, in just a few seconds, rapidly grew to the size of an adult human. His reddish-brown fur became even thicker, muscles swelled beneath his skin, and his limbs became thick and powerful. Every muscle contained explosive power. Only where his tail had been broken, only a bloody stump remained, like a mark of shame. The squirrel glanced at the depths of the forest, then turned and bolted out of the forest. His speed was astonishing. Trees were snapped as he passed, bushes were crushed. In the dense forest, he tore open a path 2 meters wide. Leaving twisted marks, the squirrel continued to race without looking back. He could feel a city outside the forest. There were countless rats there. Thousands upon thousands. The squirrel bared his teeth, revealing sharp fangs. A squirrel is a rat. Rats are also rats. Once an army is established, he wouldn't fear that human anymore. 20 minutes later, Hubei Expressway, 5 p.m. Inside a white sedan, the driver was yawning. Damn, I'm tired. The driver rubbed his swollen eyes, lit a cigarette. Smoke filled the car cabin, making him feel slightly more awake. Having driven long distance all day, he was so sleepy his eyelids were fighting to stay open. His upper and lower eyelids seemed glued together with superglue. Every time he blinked, he had to use all his strength to open them again. Just a little more, past the toll booth and I'll be home. The driver stubbed out the cigarette, and rubbed his eyes again. The car cabin echoed with the engine and leisurely music, monotonous and hypnotic. The driver's head slowly drooped. The steering wheel started to veer off course. Just then, a sudden, ear-piercing screech of brakes came from ahead. A continuous chorus of screeching brakes followed. The driver jolted awake. Instinctively, he slammed on the brakes. Tires screeched against the asphalt. The car body shook violently. What's going on? He gripped the steering wheel. His eyes wide, he stared ahead. All the vehicles in front had come to a halt. Some even changed lanes directly, swerving to the roadside. The scene was utter chaos. Peering through the gaps between the cars ahead, the driver saw a giant squirrel standing in the middle of the highway. A squirrel, in the city? What the hell? What is that thing? A monster? A mutated creature? An alien? It wasn't just old Zhang. Every driver on the entire highway was stunned by this sight. What the hell is that thing? Run. Call the police. Call the police. The highway instantly erupted into pandemonium. The squirrel stood in the middle of the highway, slowly turned its head, scanning the surrounding vehicles. Its gaze was cold, as if looking at a swarm of ants. The screams of these humans irritated it immensely. Just then, the roar of an engine came from behind it. A black sedan sped towards it. The driver inside was clearly distracted. The squirrel's eyes narrowed. It didn't dodge. Instead, it raised a paw. Bang! A tremendous crash echoed. The entire highway trembled. But the expected outcome, the scene of the squirrel being flung away, didn't happen. Instead, the squirrel lifted a front paw and forcefully braced against the front of the sedan. Beneath its feet, 2 deep gouges stretched out from the point of impact. Lost control and became disoriented, and the front of the car was completely crushed. Like a crumpled piece of scrap paper. The driver inside didn't need to think to know what their fate would be. Everyone around went completely crazy. "Oh my god, what the hell is this monster?" He caught the car with his bare hands. Countless phones were raised. Lenses aimed at the squirrel. Camera flashes went off incessantly. Video calls, live streams and recordings. The squirrel released its claws, then spun around sharply and leapt down from the highway, rushing towards the distant city. From the outside, the Bayambe City Instant Noodle Detective Agency was just a dilapidated private detective agency. But in reality, this was the underground headquarters of Bayambe City's top personnel. Various high-tech equipment was neatly arranged. In the very center was a huge curved screen. On it, like a radar, it displayed the situation of the entire Bayambe City. Sishui leaned lazily back in the chair in front of the screen, with his legs crossed, holding a glass of iced cola. "The logistics department is really boring," Sishui yawned and took another sip of cola. The bubbles burst in his mouth, bringing a hint of coolness. Ever since he was injured in the last encounter with Dachu, the captain had assigned him to the logistics department to recover. Every day he just watched the radar in the monitoring room. If there was a situation, he'd report it to the captain. He wasn't required to carry out missions. Bayambe City was a small city. With a population of less than 1 million, the frequency of anomalies appearing was very low. Basically, fewer than 10 anomalies appeared each month. Moreover, most were small, Xiaosui level anomalies. Of course, that Dasui level Dachu from a few days ago was purely an accident. What a situation, Sishui sighed, and took another sip of cola. He didn't know when his wretched injury would heal. Just then, an urgent alarm suddenly blared, echoing throughout the entire underground space. Sishui calmly looked up at the radar. When he clearly saw the red dot on the screen and the words next to it, the cola he was drinking sprayed right out. Anomaly code unknown, anomaly level Dasui. Sishui didn't bother to wipe her mouth. She hurriedly pulled out her phone. The distribution of people throughout Bayambe City. Only Captain Mangtian could deal with Dasui. Moreover, if Dasui and the anomaly were left unchecked, they could also destroy a city. If it were to cause trouble in the city, the consequences would be unimaginable. The death toll would be at least in the thousands. "Captain, another Dasui in the west of the city. Xiang Plaza, in the west of Bayambe City. This is the largest public activity venue in the west of the city. It covers a full 20,000 square meters. Every evening, large numbers of elderly people gather here to do square dancing, practice Tai Chi, walk their dogs, and chat." It was currently the prime time after dinner. At least 1,000 people had gathered in the plaza. The speakers in the square dance area were playing the most dazzling ethnic style. Deafening music echoed through the plaza. The aunties, dressed in colorful dance outfits, were wriggling and twisting like pigs scalded by boiling water. The one designated '05 was an auntie in her 50s. Her surname was Wang, and everyone called her Captain Wang. Just as the aunties were dancing with gusto, the plaza's broadcast system suddenly came on. "Citizens of Bayambe City, please pay attention. A high-risk situation has emerged in the West District. Please evacuate eastward immediately." The sound was very loud, drowning out the square dance music. The aunties paused for a moment. Their movements slowed. What anomaly? It's probably just another prank by those young people. Ignore it, keep dancing. Captain Wang waved her hand. The aunties continued dancing. But just then, a loud bang came from a distance. Everyone stopped. They looked in the direction of the sound. They saw on the east side of the plaza, a huge figure leaping over from a distance. The figure traced an arc in the air, then landed heavily on the edge of the plaza. Bang! The massive impact created a crater in the ground. Spider-web-like cracks spread in all directions. Debris flew everywhere. Dust billowed. A giant squirrel appeared before everyone's eyes. It was over 2 meters tall. Its body was covered in reddish-brown fur, with thick, strong limbs. Its fist-sized eyes were full of violence. The square instantly fell silent. The music was still playing, but everyone stood frozen in place, staring at this giant monster. "What is that thing?" an old man asked in a trembling voice. Monster. "Oh my god, run." The crowd instantly erupted. But no one left. Instead, they chose to stay and watch the show. The squirrel stood still, staring at the speaker. Filled with annoyance, it had originally wanted to hide directly in the sewer. But this damn speaker was too loud. As deafening as that person's chainsaw. Don't come any closer. Captain Wang bravely stepped forward, standing in front of the speaker. That speaker is mine, I bought it for 3,000 yuan. Everyone around was stunned. Sister Wang, come back quickly. Don't go over there, that's a monster. Are you crazy? But Captain Wang ignored them, trying to move the speaker away. The moment his hand touched the speaker, the squirrel moved. It raised a front paw and lightly swatted it, as if swatting a fly. With a loud bang, Captain Wang let out a horrific scream. His entire body flew out like a cannonball. He arced through the air in a parabola, flying over 20 meters, and then crashed heavily to the ground. Thud, he lay on the ground. His back bulged where his chest should be. His entire chest cavity had collapsed. His ribs were all broken and sunken, piercing his internal organs. Murder. Only then did the crowd grasp the horror. Screams echoed throughout the entire square. The scene spiraled out of control. A hint of disdain flashed in the squirrel's eyes. He raised his paw, aimed at the speaker, and smashed it down fiercely. A loud bang. The speaker instantly shattered into pieces. The music abruptly stopped. The world finally fell silent. Then the squirrel turned and rushed towards a nearby sewer. He plunged headfirst into it. The sewer was pitch black. The air was filled with a nauseating stench. An ordinary person would last 10 seconds in this environment before vomiting uncontrollably. But the squirrel didn't care at all. He stood in the shallow sewage water. His massive eyes, in the darkness, gleamed with a vivid red light, like two will-o'-the-wisps. The squirrel let out a low growl. The sound echoed through the sewer. The next second, thousands of rats, as if summoned by something, swarmed towards the squirrel in unison. They swam in the sewage, like a surging tide. They lined up neatly, stopping before the squirrel. The squirrel extended a paw, and snatched one from the horde of rats. He lifted the rat to his eye level, staring at it for a few seconds. Then he opened his mouth and gently exhaled a breath towards the rat. A faint green mist spewed from the squirrel's mouth, enveloping the rat, and slowly seeping into its body. The next second, the rat's body, at a visible speed, rapidly grew larger. In just a dozen seconds, this rat transformed from palm-sized into a giant beast, just like the squirrel. Moreover, its appearance also changed. From a rat, it completely became a giant squirrel, identical to its creator, except its eyes lacked that wisdom, leaving only pure brutality and a desire for slaughter. The newborn giant rat let out a long howl heavenward. Then, with a push of its forelimbs, it leapt fiercely out of the manhole. It landed on the plaza, and charged towards the crowd. Screams soon erupted. Then it came to an abrupt halt. In the sewer, the squirrel paid no attention to the commotion outside. He continued his work, grabbing a mouse. Exhaling, he let go. Grabbed a mouse. Exhaling, he let go. Giant rats were created one after another. Then jumped out from the wellhead and began to wreak havoc on the ground. The entire west side of the city fell into chaos. West Street of Tianbei City. It was already 7 p.m. The sky had completely darkened. Street lights lit up in the darkness, but their light seemed especially dim, unable to illuminate this chaotic district. The streets were a mess. Overturned cars were everywhere. Shattered shop windows and corpses. A dozen giant rats rampaged through the streets. Some were chasing citizens who hadn't managed to escape. Some were overturning cars, searching for hidden humans. Others directly charged into shops, dragging people out to tear and bite them. Screams and cries. Calls for help rose one after another. Help! Someone save me. I don't want to die. The screams of agony stopped abruptly. Another life vanished. The giant squirrel licked the fresh blood from the corner of its mouth, seeming to enjoy it immensely. But the next second, a long spear pierced his neck, nailing him to the wall. The other giant squirrels roared, looking at the black-robed figure running down the street, then simultaneously charged towards him. A speed dragon's roar rang out. Behind the black-robed figure, a long dragon made of lines rushed out. The few giant squirrels charging at the very front were instantly crushed. And he also drew his dagger, instantly pierced the necks of the remaining 2 giant squirrels. Similar scenes were playing out in other places. The front page people who came as reinforcements from other cities were all clearing out the giant squirrels. At the same time, deep in the sewers, a man in black was moving quickly. His footsteps were light, almost silent, but his speed was astonishing. Each step covered 7 or 8 meters, like a black streak of lightning. In the north was Mang Tian, the night watchman captain. Rat King, where exactly are you? Mang Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, his expression grim. As long as the Rat King was alive, he could continuously create large squirrels. The efforts of the night watchman above would be in vain. So he had to find him as soon as possible and kill him. Suddenly, a voice came through his earpiece. I am Zhao Long, captain of the night watchman in Heilong City. I found the Rat King and broadcasted my location, requesting backup. Mang Tian stopped instantly. He quickly pulled out his phone. On the screen, a map of Bay's sewers was displayed. And in the center of the map, a huge red dot was flashing. A golden light flashed in Mang Tian's eyes. He put away his phone, and stomped his foot down with a mighty force. A deep pit was left in the concrete ground, with spiderweb-like cracks spreading outwards. Mang Tian's figure shot out like a cannonball, moving so fast that he left an after-image in the air. At the same time, the night watchman and major teams from other cities arriving as reinforcements also received the message, and rushed towards the red dot. Early the next morning, I woke up early. There was still a small part of yesterday's black pear blossom tree left to chop, and I had to finish it today and then transport it. I ate a simple breakfast, and headed out with the yellow wooden axe on my shoulder. As the sky brightened, a layer of white mist still hung in the mountains. A moment later, I arrived at the black pear blossom forest. I looked at the tree I had half chopped yesterday, took a deep breath, and squatted down, swinging the axe with a fierce chop. After chopping for about 20 minutes, with a loud crash, this black pear tree finally fell. Phew, I wiped my sweat, and continued to wield the axe, chopping the trunk into sections. After more than an hour of work, I finally finished processing the entire tree. I returned to the cabin and drove the forklift over. The forklift bumped along the forest path. I carefully steered, avoiding the protruding rocks and tree roots. Just as I was about to load the first section of wood, a crow suddenly swooped down from the sky, landing in front of the forklift. Cawing, the crow flapped its wings, flying back and forth in front of the forklift. It looked like it wanted to stop me. This crow was a size bigger than an ordinary crow, its feathers were glossy black, and its eyes gleamed with intelligence. Another one. I frowned. So many spirits. I honked the horn, trying to scare the crow away, but the crow wasn't scared in the slightest. Instead, it flew even more excitedly. From time to time, it would peck at the car window. Get lost. I rolled down the car window, and waved my hand at the crow. The crow tilted its head and glanced at me, then it obediently flew away. Good, you're sensible. I let out a sigh of relief, and continued driving to load the wood. However, it wasn't long before the crow flew back again. This time, it was clutching a lump of mud in its talons. The crow flew onto the forklift's front windshield, using its talons to smear and draw on it. What the devil is it doing? I stopped the forklift, frowning. I tried to see what this crow was really up to. The crow flew back and forth several times. Each time, it carried mud, continuously smearing and drawing on the glass. Gradually, some crooked, twisted marks appeared on the glass. I rubbed my chin, my expression turned serious, because this crow actually rotate characters. If you cut down the tree again, we will all die. Although the 8 large characters were written very badly, they could indeed be recognized. The toilet truly has gained sentience. I felt a bit emotional. I only regret not having my phone with me now. Otherwise, I could have filmed a video and posted it online. Maybe I could even become an internet celebrity. Caw caw, the crow saw I wasn't speaking, and cawed twice more. I glanced at it, pondering what those words meant. If we cut down trees, we will all die. Who will die? These animals, or including myself? How will we die? Is it due to ecological damage, or some other reason? I looked at the words on the glass, and fell into deep thought. This crow, its hostility towards me wasn't that obvious. Unlike the previous squirrel and moose that directly attacked me, it was more like a warning to me. Caw caw caw. The crow stood on the front of the car and cawed twice again. You mean something will happen if I cut down the black pear tree? I asked tentatively. The crow nodded frantically, like a chick pecking at rice. I frowned. These animals, having gained sentience, are all stopping me from cutting trees, so there must be a reason. They definitely know more than I do. This black pear tree is indeed strange. But I'm here to work. If I don't cut trees, how will I earn money? How will I support my sisters? As for dying or not, I'm not that scared. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taken on so many dangerous jobs. Instead, I'd rather get a hefty compensation, then go to another world and become the protagonist. Sorry, my bird brother, I need to eat too. I shook my head, and used the wipers to scrape off the mud on the glass. Then I continued driving. Caw. The crow, in a fit of pique, stomped its feet on the car roof. But it made no further moves. It just flew to a tree branch, watching me load the wood onto the car. A moment later, it flew deep into the forest. Meanwhile, I transported that section of timber to the log cabin. Then I drove the forklift up the mountain, ready to transport the last section of wood. However, just as I was passing a patch of bushes, a deafening roar suddenly erupted. The roar was so loud it made my ears ring. The next second, the bushes beside me suddenly burst open, and a huge black bear charged out. The size of this bear was simply outrageous. Standing up, it was at least 4 meters tall. Its entire body was almost as big as the forklift. Its black fur was shiny and lustrous. Its muscles bulged. I stared wide-eyed. Instinctively, I wanted to step on the gas and escape, but it was already too late. The black bear rushed to the side of the forklift. Its 2 huge paws grabbed the vehicle body, then it violently flipped it. Boom. The entire forklift was thrown to the ground. I was tossed around inside the cab, completely disoriented. What the hell was that? I lay in the cab, not getting up immediately. Instead, I grabbed my hunting rifle, and cautiously watched the door above me, fearing the black bear would poke its head in the next second. But after waiting for a long time, I didn't see the black bear come. I only heard dull footsteps outside, and the cawing of crows. The footsteps gradually receded. Only then did I stand up, and looked out through the car window. I saw the black bear carrying the black rosewood and heading into the mountains. That crow was standing right on top of its head. Damn, I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead. My back was soaked with sweat. This bear's size felt even more formidable than a moose. If it had charged at me just now, I probably would have been gone with one swipe. Luckily, it just wanted the wood. It had no intention of harming me. I looked at the forklift lying on the ground, wanting to cry but having no tears. This thing weighs at least 2 tons. I can't flip it back over by myself at all. Without the forklift, even if I cut down the trees, I can't transport them out. How am I supposed to work now? Now it's really like Boonie Bears. These animals, which have become sentient, are all stopping me from cutting trees. How am I supposed to do this? I'm not like Baldy-chan with an immortal body. Returned to the wooden cabin. I took out my satellite phone and called Boss Lee. Xiaolin, what's wrong? Boss Lee asked, raising his voice. Boss Lee, something's not right about this place, is it? Today, I encountered a bear that overturned a forklift. And there was also a crow that could write. Boss Lee was stunned for a moment. How big was a bear that could overturn a forklift? Bigger than the forklift, I replied truthfully. The other end of the phone fell silent.